Okay, let's talk about J.D. Salinger's The Catcher in the Rye. I mean, for more than 70 years, this book has been called everything from a masterpiece to, well, pretentious drivel. It's kind of wild, right? It's been banned from schools and then turned right around and made required reading in those same schools. So, what's the deal? Is it a timeless classic or is it just a cultural artifact that's way past its expiration date? We're going to unpack the legacy of one of the most divisive books ever.
So first things first, let's just get a sense of the scale here. The book has sold over 65 million copies worldwide. Just let that sink in. 65 million. That's a staggering number. It puts it in the stratosphere of cultural phenomena. This isn't just a book, it's practically a global institution. But, does that automatically make it good?
And that question really brings us to the heart of the whole debate. One source put it perfectly, I think. They asked, is this book a brilliant masterpiece about teenage alienation, or is it the original sad boy fetish? You know? Is it a literary icon, or just an excuse to feel superior without actually doing anything? That is a sharp question, and we are absolutely going to explore both sides of it. All right, let's kick things off with the prosecution. Because for every single person who thinks Holden Caulfield is some kind of misunderstood hero, there's someone else who finds him, well, let's just say less than charming. And this quote, man, it really just cuts right to the heart of the criticism. For a lot of people, Holden isn't some complex antihero. He's just annoying, plain and simple. His constant complaining isn't seen as some deep social commentary. It's just the whiny monologue of a teenager who really needs to get over himself. So let's break down the actual case against him. The arguments from the prosecution, they paint a pretty clear picture. First off, he's a spoiled, entitled rich kid whose problems are, let's be honest, mostly self-inflicted. His entire journey is just this whiny, plotless monologue. And his big rebellion, come on, it's pretty trivial stuff. Skipping school, lying, calling everyone a phony. He never actually risks anything. He's just wandering around New York on his parents' dime, feeling sorry for himself. And in the end, critics say he doesn't grow, he doesn't change. He basically becomes the patron saint for anyone who thinks being cynical is the same as having a personality. Now, this is where it gets really interesting, because look at how Holden stacks up against other literary icons. When you put him side by side with other famous young narrators, the case against him gets even stronger. I mean, you've got Huck Finn, who literally risks his own soul to help free an enslaved person. You've got Scout Finch, who's staring down deep-seated racism and fighting for justice. And then there's Holden Caulfield. What's his big conflict? He finds the adult world annoying. The stakes just don't really seem to be in the same league, do they? But wait, that's only one side of the story. For millions and millions of readers, Holden isn't an annoying brat at all. He's a deeply wounded, incredibly realistic character. So now, let's hear from the defense.
And this really illustrates the massive divide, doesn't it? Where one person sees a spoiled, privileged kid complaining about nothing. Someone else sees a really profound case study in loneliness, trauma, and a complete psychological collapse. The defense argues that we're not supposed to like him as a hero. We're supposed to see him for what he is, a kid who is completely falling apart at the seams.
So, the absolute crucial point for the defense is this. Holden's behavior is a direct result of trauma. You have to remember, he's dealing with the death of his younger brother, Ali. The whole book is a subtle but incredibly powerful portrait of unresolved grief, depression, and maybe even PTSD. He's not just being a cynical jerk for fun. He's desperately trying to protect himself from a world that has already caused him just unbearable pain. Okay, but the debate isn't just about what Holden does, right? It's also about how Salinger tells the story. And that brings us to his famous and, famously divisive writing style. And the divide is just as sharp here, too. On one side, people praise Salinger's colloquial brilliance. They say he captured, maybe for the first time ever, the real, authentic, rambling sound of a teenager's thoughts. But on the other side, critics call it a lazy, repetitive gimmick. All those phrases like, it really killed me, and calling everyone a phony, they argue it just feels outdated and honestly kind of grating to read today. But the defense has a really powerful counterargument. They say the style is supposed to be aimless and repetitive. See, the plotless, wandering story isn't a flaw, it's a feature. It's designed to perfectly mirror the confused, chaotic, and traumatized mind of a teenager who is just completely and utterly lost. The form, they argue, perfectly matches the function. Okay, we can't possibly talk about Catcher in the Rye without getting into the whole mythology that's built up around it. Because, look, its legendary status isn't just about what's written on the pages. It's also about all these powerful cultural forces that were swirling around outside of it. And really, these four things created the perfect storm. First, you've got the author who just completely vanishes from public life. Then, all the school bans, which, just made kids want to read it even more. Then, it gets added to the official school curriculum. And finally, it becomes this massive pop culture legend. All that together, it built a mystique that's almost impossible to separate from the actual book. And this timeline just shows you the power of that mystique so clearly. After 1965, J.D. Salinger goes completely silent for 45 years. That silence created this whole aura of mystery and intellectual prestige around his most famous book. An author who's on talk shows or tweeting all the time could never ever achieve that. His absence actually made the book even bigger. So you really have to ask yourself, did this book become a legend because it was just that great? Or did it become a legend because society kind of panicked about it? I mean, the constant school bans, all the controversy, even its really unfair connection to tragedies like the assassination of John Lennon. All of it fed into this idea that this book was dangerous. And let's be real, sometimes being seen as dangerous is the best marketing a book can possibly get. So, okay, we've looked at the character, we've looked at the writing style, and we've looked at the whole cultural mythology. Where does that leave us? Is The Catcher in the Rye a masterpiece, or is it just massively overrated? Well, the most honest answer is it's kind of both. Is it overrated? Yeah, probably, if you treat it like some flawless sacred scripture, like it's the only novel that truly gets what it's like to be a teenager. There are plenty of other great books out there, and Holden is definitely not a universal symbol for everybody. But is it overrated as a cultural milestone? No way. Absolutely not. It genuinely redefined literature. It broke barriers with its raw honesty and its unique voice, and it totally paved the way for all the modern young adult fiction we have today. Which brings us to one last question. Holden Caulfield, as we all know, famously hated phonies. But when you look at his own flawed, contradictory, and deeply human performance of being an outsider, you just have to wonder, is he the biggest phony of them all? Or is he, in fact, the most authentic character we've ever met? And that right there, that contradiction is exactly why we're still talking about him more than 70 years later.